I do admit that I liked the style and vision of the Zack Snyder DC Extended Universe, the DCEU, which of course is now gone. In particular, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and his version of Justice League. But I can completely understand why it didn't resonate with most people, why it didn't work in the end. It was perhaps too much of a departure, and the films were long, very atmospheric. They were heavy and often incorporating a lot of characters and intricate story elements, which needed more movies to fully play out. And Zack Snyder was definitely building towards something. He was telling a larger story over the course of those movies. And to some people, they didn't want to see that. They wanted films that were much more self-contained. But I think this is especially true of the extended cut of Batman v Superman and the Snyder cut of Justice League, which was effectively a different film when you compare it to the Joss Whedon version of Justice League. But the films weren't profitable enough to justify continuing the series, and gradually the DCEU morphed into a kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe knockoff in terms of tone and visual style, becoming less serious and more comedic and colourful as the movies went on. And I think ultimately the MCU wasn't going to be replicated. That's what Warner was trying to achieve. They were trying to make their own version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they were also trying to skip a few steps. You know, they'd done Man of Steel, and then they really needed to establish the other characters in their own standalone movies first. Flash, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Batman. But instead they went straight into Batman v Superman and then straight into Justice League, and it just didn't work. And the Suicide Squad movie that was in there as well kind of gets overlooked very easily. It wasn't great. I think in its prime, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was a very unique accomplishment in cinema history. There's never been a big movie franchise at that kind of scale, and there likely never will be. So the DCEU was scrapped and replaced with the DCU, managed by James Gunn, and the first film in that series, which he directed, was last year's Superman. And that was a reboot of the universe. They were starting all over again from a blank slate, recasting the characters, and it was financially unsuccessful. The series is continuing with a sequel, this year's follow-up, Supergirl, and that film has been going through numerous changes recently in post-production. I don't think it's looking good for that film, and I have to ask, is the DCU going to work? Or is it dead on arrival? Is it unlikely to have a long-term future? Because I can't really see it working out, to be honest. I'm going to take a look at this article from Bounding Into Comics. Unusually high number of Supergirl test screenings raising red flags. Is Warner Brothers scrambling behind the scenes? I've already talked about the numerous test screenings that they've done so far for this film. They've obviously been trying to solicit as much feedback from test audiences as possible, and different versions of the film have been shown, but regardless of which cut of the film was shown, reactions remain mixed. So, yeah, I don't think that's a good sign. It says, Supergirl, one of the pillars of James Gunn's DCU, is in the spotlight, but for all the wrong reasons. What should be a straightforward cosmic character piece has instead become the subject of a mountain of concern. Reports from inside the test screening circuit paint a portrait of a production struggling to find an identity. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound good, does it? Certainly from the trailers released so far, I haven't been impressed. I have to say, I haven't been impressed. The film feels very Guardians of the Galaxy in terms of look, color palette, the music they're going for, just the feel of it, the tone of it. It feels very Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think shouldn't come as any surprise. That is consistent with the filmmaking style of James Gunn, because of course he directed the 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Now this film is directed by Craig Gillespie, but it's produced by James Gunn and Peter Safran. So it says the biggest red flag is the sheer number of test screenings which usually amount to 2 or 3 for studio films. However, Supergirl has reportedly had 8, and sources indicate that the overkill of a tally is not for the sake of refinement. Yes, it suggests the filmmakers are uncertain as to which direction and which edit to go with for the final release of the movie. It does suggest uncertainty. Keep in mind, this film is due out in the summer. It's coming out in June of this year. Each round brought new edits, structural changes, and in some cases, entirely new endings. 3 different finales. As if we're dealing with Clue. It's one of my favourite movies, actually, Clue. Have been shown to audiences so far. This is the kind of churn that belies a creative team still trying to figure out what story they're telling. Yes, indeed. So, that's a lot of changes. A lot of changes so far. And when they talk about structural changes there, well, structural changes could also indicate very different edits, very different interpretations of the film, to the point where, you know, scenes are moved around or omitted, so the film could be structured in very different ways. And with talk of different endings as well. So that's significant differences between the various cuts of the movie. Like, quite significant differences. And if they have produced so many different versions of the movie, that doesn't indicate confidence in the project to me. It doesn't indicate confidence in what they've shot and the kind of film they're going for. I mean, for example, maybe they wanted to start out with doing something that was quite lighthearted and colourful, like the first movie, and maybe they found that wasn't working as well, and they wanted to go more serious, or vice versa. Could be vice versa. And I think this next bit really says it all. Despite all the tinkering, reactions remain stubbornly mixed. Not disastrous, but not encouraging either. It sounds very middle of the road. Viewers describe the film as having moments of clarity buried inside a narrative that never quite finds a rhythm. And if this is only the second film in this new DCU series, and they're having these kinds of issues with this movie, a sequel to last year's Superman, which wasn't a box office success, it was therefore not a good start, and the second film is having these kinds of problems. I just can't see how this is going to bode well for the DCU. So that's why I'm asking the question, is the DCU basically dead on arrival? You know, it's not long out of the gate and already we're seeing these problems. I'm personally of the belief that the DCEU was still salvageable with the right creative direction. Maybe that franchise, which they'd spent years building, could have been turned around. But that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen now at this point. So they're going to move forward with this. And I'm not liking what I'm seeing already. I didn't like Superman last year. And I don't like what I've seen from Supergirl based on the trailers we've had for that film so far. So guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Computing Forever. Hit that notification bell to be notified of future updates on the channel. Hit that like button. Share the video out there. Take care. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.